right, guys, welcome on in and to the Burning Power Show, where you are therefore required to love yourself. And this is where we are also in the processing of wanting ourselves, needing ourselves, and trusting ourselves once again. And where we are in the processing also of loving ourselves back to life. And we are on the 30-day devotional journey for the relinquishment of our spiritual pain. And we are on day 13 of that journey. And the journey is taken from my book entitled Excerpts from Exclaims of Sorrow, which is a 30-day devotional for the relinquishment of spiritual pain. And we are in the very pursuit of the book and the journey as for the commune with God, in order for God to consider the areas of spiritual pain that we have been facing as it pertains to the earth realm experience and all that details. And today's area for devotional day 13, it is entitled Living in Bitterness. And so it is the area of topic or area of spiritual pain that we are dealing with and facing today. And this is definitely a touching topic for me, because I can relate all too well, and I'm sure there's many of you out there, possibly the entire population, that has dealt with some form of bitterness, that has been caused due to what life has done to us and what experiences that we have faced up until now that have led to the pain and the bitterness. And bitterness is an area that normally takes place after, the pain, the sadness, and the pain and the sorrow and the weariness. And then you enter into the bitterness, where you have therefore become bitter about everything that you have faced as far as the rejection of life, and the inability to make happen or obtain the life that you believe that you deserved, and the life that you want, because that's a continual avenue that we're walking down every day that we take a breath. We're trying to obtain the life that we want. And it's a very painful experience when you are unable to do that. And I can recall so many times when I tried to force something to happen for myself or will something to happen for myself in my life, and those things seemingly being unattainable for me, and really dealing with the pain and going through every different facet of the areas of that particular pain. And bitterness was a very hard area for me, because bitterness takes you out of your complete character, and then you become a part of yourself that you never knew even existed deep down inside of you, because that's when all of the anger and resentment starts housing itself inside of you. And as many of you know, I'm very open about sharing my experiences with my life. And very recently for me, going through the whole experience of being bitter about my life and not being able to obtain what I consider to be the inadequacies of myself. Number one being learning how to develop a substantial relationship with my own self, And how many of us can agree with that, that we can't find that type of healing until we go through all of the journeys that we go through, trying to obtain what we seemingly never do receive. Number one, that being for me. Number two, I should say, that was always housed in the relationship status for me, and trying to obtain a relationship. You may have heard this before, because I do touch base on this area for me, as it was one of my most hurtful experiences, which almost cost me my very life. Dealing in a lot of years of loneliness, and the pain of rejection, and living in the face of rejection, and not being wanted, and having to discover after several years of pain that I didn't want myself, and having to learn how to love myself back to life, and really trying to will the possibility of someone loving me and seeing me for who I am and appreciating me and everything that would be the makeup of having the love that we desire. And what we don't realize is what we end up doing when we're in pursuit of the yearn and the desire of our hearts. We always end up not realizing that we are inadvertently attracting the pain instead of the promise. And so that's why we never receive it, because I'm searching from a place of pain. And so I can recall all the times, I spoke to this case on the show that I was interviewed on television, Talented, with Mr. Landon Prater, about the serial love ship. I found myself on the serial love boat, in a constant state of rejection for possibly majority of my life, searching for love in all the wrong places, and displacing my love in all the wrong places, and giving my love over into the hands of the enemy. And what did I end up? Left to pick up the broken pieces of my severed life. And where could I turn to when I turned the key to an empty home? And I threw away every ounce of the love I had for myself in the garbage can. And life dumped me in the dumpster, where I decided to leave myself. And I began to live in the wasteland of the demise that I created for my life, trying to love somebody. And they didn't love me back. And so anybody that suffered with unrequited love can tell you the agony that you could face. That particular pertaining to rejection, that particular rejection is possibly one of the worst type of rejections you could face, because it's completely a noble and selfless act that you would love somebody and be in love alone. And so that's what I've done majority of my life, been in love alone. And so I found myself bitter and driving aimlessly around, not wanting to turn the key to my door, driving around in my car, hoping and wishing for the admiration of another that I could never get. And shedding tears in urine-drenched stalls, crying over the commode of urine-drenched bar stools, trying to drink myself to death because I didn't know which way to turn to. And the rejection of a broken heart. And when your heart's broken, I assume the only thing that you can come in contact with is another broken heart. And so I had to really do some deep digging, and really for maybe about almost a year now, I've been on the journey or the assignment that God sent me on, considering the yearn and the desire of my heart, which was God allowing me to hinder myself, basically, and pursue. Hopping back on the serial love boat and giving my love over, which I would never regret falling in love with somebody or giving my love or experiencing love. Because anytime that you experience it, it's worth the experience. But the rejection of life because you've chosen to give up on yourself and not love yourself enough to give yourself time enough to, number one, heal, and number two, an opportunity to believe that you deserve what you're worthy of. And so you go on these continual journeys about the bitterness of life and the spirit of bitterness, because you have taken roots that have led you down a dark tunnel. And there you go, sitting there again, looking at the empty walls of your existence, trying to figure out how you got there. And sitting in the feeble position of depression, wondering why you can't get up and you can't take the next step because you don't know which step to take. And so this was definitely an area for me, because bitterness definitely can take you out of character. And it's a very vile spirit and a very abrasive characterization that takes you out of the humanity of your own life and out of the integrity of your person. To the point where you have to question the own integrity of your heart. I watched myself die. And I watched the last beat of a dying heart. And I watched it pump on the floor. And I took my foot and I stumped on it. And I watched the last ounce of hope that I had in my heart take its last breath, because I didn't love myself. And I thought if I gave every ounce of the love I had left over into someone else, that they'd love me back. But they didn't. And I watched myself die. And so I had to begin the process of re-entering the gates of a heart that's dying. And how do you do that? Because now you're the corpse of a life that's thrown you out. Because you didn't have the courage to do the work necessary to love yourself back to life. And so, I want to speak to a couple areas. As it pertains to bitterness, and life throwing you out, and what we do end up doing to ourselves when we become bitter. And what is the working definition for bitterness? It is when life has become too hard to bear, or it is a particular area of our lives that has become too hard to bear. And it is therefore it has caused us to become grievous and resentful. And so we are now in the resentful and grievous spirit, where we are feeling rightful because we feel worthless. And and what is causing that? Because it is the fierce cruelty of the world. And it's when the realities of life have really hit us. And it's when we finally come into the realization that no matter who we are, and no matter what we can produce, and no matter how good you are, and no matter how gifted or talented or whatever titles you hold, life will creep up. And you will be the victim of the cruelty that we must face, which is causing us to experience the sardonic captivity of the bitterness of the earth realm experience. Because just like in the account for me, and the spirit of loneliness that, hovered over me all these years, and dealing with the rejection literally everywhere in every area of my life, whether that be career or intimacy or what have you, the most painful for me, as I always state, has been the rejection of love of another, and having to face in those pursuits, being a talented person and being everything that you would presumably want in a mate, and having everything to offer, and giving all that you have to give, and seeing somebody through their ups and their downs, and loving them exactly where they are, exactly where they're at, and giving them the integrity that you hold in your heart, and they're not being appreciated because they don't love you. And that's a hard pill to swallow. Not being wanted, no matter what you do, or what you try, or what way you reshape yourself, or whatever the case, you're still not good enough in the eyes of the beholder. And so, and I'm just talking pertaining to this as it relates to my story, to give the account of my truths. This doesn't have to be your story, but yet and still, it's the case of the rejection of life. And when life has thrown you out, and you're living in the wasteland of your existence, because life has thrown you in the garbage can, and now you're resenting the fact that you're even alive. And now you've thrown yourself further and further away from your purpose. And now you feel like you don't know which way to turn. And as I stated, we're in the fierce cruelty that the world is offering us, even though we've given the world everything that we have to offer as a living sacrifice into this earth realm. We're experiencing the fact that when we do that, life is still not going to give us what we want. And which is why we're on this journey, so that we can learn how to commune with God, so we can begin restoring ourselves in Him, and begin receiving the fresh water that we need in order to live. And what has happened when life has thrown us out? Life has therefore removed us from a place. Actually, let's get a full definition. To be thrown out is to be removed from a place, office, or employment, usually in a sudden or unexpected manner. So we have been thrown out of our own existence. And we have been thrown out of the executive office of the spirit realm that God gave us. And we have forfeited the promise, which is our employment, of God as it pertains to the earth realm experience. And it's all of a sudden, because, all of a sudden, bitterness will hit you in the spirit. It's never something that we're expecting, and it's never something that we're prepared for. And it's a part of pain that's not just psychological, but it is physical. It is a cognitive, subjective awareness about ourselves that is thrown into our spirits based on the experiences of our lives. And so, second area, it means to get rid of as worthless or unnecessary. So life has utterly thrown us out of our own existence, our consciousness, and we are now looking through the eyes of worthlessness and believing that everything that we are is unnecessary. And that is why we're bitter. Because we believe everything that we've done to obtain the life that we want was all for nothing. And it was completely unnecessary, so now we're unnecessary. And the fact of the matter is, there's nothing wrong with wanting a life that you want. God gave us all that right. But we have to understand that if we are not wanting to be in alignment with the speaking power of the voice of God, so that we can hear the life that He wants for us, this is where we're going to end up. No matter what we do or what we try, and life is going to throw us out. And there we will sit in the remains of us, housed in the garbage that we've thrown out, expelled into the darkness of the trash that we carry and the hearts that we obtain when God sent us here into the earth realm experience. And that's why we're in the pursuit of obtaining the heart God has to give us. And so I want to talk to, what are we doing when we are now in the bitterness and life has thrown us out? We are now in the business of practicing self-harm. And every day that we're living in bitterness, we are continuously in pursuit of self-harm and harming ourselves. And we are now uncontrollably doing things that are stirring the distortion of our psyche. And we're allowing ourselves to make decisions that we know aren't going to get us any closer to what we want. And so we're only going to end up hurting ourselves even further. That's all we're going to do. And I can tell you from experience that that's what we're going to do. And what is self-harm? Self-harm is when you hurt yourself on purpose. And this is very serious right now, because we are purposely harming ourselves and hindering our lives when we continue to reside in bitterness. And that's the only thing that we're doing. And it's a painful experience just to even know that we're willing to purposely or purposefully harm ourselves because we're in so much pain. We're in so much spiritual pain, and we're heartbroken over what we couldn't produce for our lives. And it's a sad, terrible case when we are purposefully harming ourselves because we can't amount up to the expectations or the needs that we have for ourselves, because they are displaced expectations and wants and needs. And so we are basically in the pursuit of overdosing our psyche with the distortion of our hearts. And my God, it's a painful thing. And that's why this was a very serious topic for me to discuss today. For all the people that are bitter. And so I'm at 27 minutes. I want to get off of this. And I'm going to go ahead and read, get to the actual devotional. Well, I can actually leave this here. The actual devotional today. And as I state on the devotionals, I would ask if you have incense in your house that you would light it. And when we light the incense, it is acting as the representative of the blood of Jesus Christ, so that it can raise out of the precipitation of this earth realm. And it can hover over the altar of the Lord to present the words that we're about to speak before the Lord, so that he can consider the pain of our hearts and of our spirits that we're trying so desperately to relinquish, till we can heal and get through. And so